Alrighty. Well, good morning, everyone. It's a little after 9. We'll get going. This is our regular meeting for December 11th, 2024 of the Elbert County Board of County Commissioners. Before we call the roll, I'd like to invite County Manager Sean Fletcher to provide us with an invocation and lead us in the pledge. Sean.
Let us pray. The word of God is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believes in the name of Jesus. Dear Lord, we ask that you watch over this gathering of people today. We ask that you continue to give us guidance and support. We ask that you watch over our emergency and first responders, that they may do their job serving the public and also stay safe. We thank you for the blessings of this year. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Actually, before we call the roll, I just wanted to mention for the crowd and for the public. So this past week was the annual winter conference for Colorado Counties, Inc. During that conference, they also hold a conference for road and bridge crews, human services folks, and county administrators and managers. And on Wednesday evening, our county manager, Sean Fletcher, was honored by his association of the 64 counties. 10 county managers were nominated, and he was selected for their Rising Star Award for new county managers. Just a great recognition of the good work he's done here over the last couple of years. So if you could join me in a round of applause. Sure. Thank you. Alrighty, it is 9:03. Emily, could you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Thayer?
Here.
Commissioner Richardson?
Here.
Commissioner Schroeder?
Here.
Alrighty, we have a quorum. I would accept a motion to approve the agenda, and I understand we have one addition. So.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the agenda with one addition, and that being adding to the action item Augusta Loop and Spring Valley Ranches for consideration.
Second.
That would be in an action item.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second to add consideration of acceptance of Augusta Loop to action. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. Okay, first business we really have are the items on consent. I'd accept a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the items on the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the items on consent. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. Alrighty. Elected officials, department head, staff reports. Do we have anything from elected officials? Nope. Internal staff? Nope. Tammy, we have a fair board report. Another very successful county fair, so thank you.
Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tammy Schneider. I currently serve as the president of the Elbert County Fair Board. And this morning with me, I have some very special guests, and I'm going to let these beautiful young women introduce themselves to you before I give the annual report.
Hello, everyone. My name is Abigail Cabrera, and I'm your 2025 Elbert County Fair Queen. It's good to see you all.
Hello everybody, my name is Maya Noe and I'm your 2025 Elbert County Fair Princess.
Wonderful.
All right, so our upcoming fair dates are July 27th through August 3rd. Please come out and support the 4-H'ers and whatever else is going on during our fair. It's a lot of fun. Thank you.
And we have a few upcoming events that we just want to let you guys all know. And one of them is the National Western Stock Show. And Unfortunately, I won't be there all the time, but Abigail will. And we're going to start off with the parade, and it's going to be fun.
Thank you.
Well, it is always such a pleasure when the royalty joins me at events. We work very hard with many committees and many different divisions. As you gentlemen know, but as I would like to make the crowd aware, the Fair Board serves at the pleasure of the BOCC as the administrative team for the organization, planning, management, and operation of the Elbert County Fair. We coordinate and work side by side with your facilities department, the county as a whole, and the extension office. We then have many subcommittees, of which you have had the pleasure of seeing one this morning. The Elbert County Royalty Committee selects every year new girls to basically wonderfully, and I can't even tell you the dedication of these groups of young ladies who promote our fair. And as they just mentioned to you, they will begin their 2025 fair season by starting at the National Western Stock Show and promoting the county and the county fair until we reach our annual county fair in August. So at this time, I'm going to let them have a seat, and I will go ahead and give the report. Thank you. Thank you, ladies, for all you do. And of course to their parents, as this is a family event, of course. So in 2024, the Elbert County Fair had its 90th annual county fair. And we were very excited to partner with the 150th committee and brought that theme into the Elbert County Fair. You will see in the annual report that I have submitted that I have a quick synopsis of the history of the county fair from its early roots through 2024. This was the 90th year we had the fair held in Kiowa, but the actual first county fair was held in 1904 and has made its rounds around the county throughout the years. We work very hard as a fair board to preserve our rural heritage and highlight the rich history of this county. We recognize there's a changing demographic and a population increase, and the fair has changed much over the last few years in particular. This year, I am pleased to report to you record attendance. Wow, is all I have to say about the 2024 fair. It started on that opening weekend with the Centennial Farms and Ranches Banquet, which we will now add as an annual event. It was so well received, giving us as a fair board and as a community a chance to recognize those heritage ranches of Elbert County. And then we roll in animals, 4-H projects. We have a wonderful partnership with Callie Benson in the Extension Office. We work side by side with their team to make sure that the 4-Hers stay center stage throughout the week. And then on Friday this year, we came back with the free Elbert County Horse Pull. We had teams from all over the state, very well attended event. And then we rolled right into Saturday. Saturday was record attendance, record-breaking sales again at this year's Junior Market Livestock Sale. And then that night we were honored to welcome Nashville recording superstars, the Bellamy Brothers, for a concert in the arena. I like to say it was a Chamber of Commerce Elbert County night that evening with beautiful weather. Everyone had a wonderful time. That concert was attended by over 2,000 people and just really felt like a wonderful culmination of years of work by this fair board to bring a big event into our county. And so that was very exciting. Of course, our focus is always going to be on community events and how to highlight our youth and all the wonderful things that they do for us. You'll find lots of detailed information in our report, but I would like to close. I did dedicate my report this year to Mr. Warhay. Of course, you all know we lost Gary in October, and unless you were a first-time visitor to the fairgrounds this year, you noticed substantial improvements and upgrades. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for the support in general of this entire county as we have started to make some upgrades and really bring our fairgrounds to be able to serve the increasing attendance and the increasing 4-H numbers that we are seeing as well. And I will let Callie give those 4-H numbers when it's her turn, but just wanted to thank you all and acknowledge all of Gary's vision and his hardworking staff to make this really, I think, one of the best fairs that we've ever had. And so you will see my report in its entirety. I have lots of wonderful pictures courtesy of Susan Seawald, our photographer. And I am happy at this time to make some 2025 announcements to you. As the young lady shared with you, our fair dates will be the 27th through the 3rd. August 2nd, we have contracted with Nashville recording artist Blackhawk. And so I am using today to make the official announcement of the 2025 entertainment section of the Elbert County Fair. Happy to take any questions at this time.
Any questions or comments?
No questions, just thank you for the work and all the Fair Board does to put it together. So I know it pays well.
It is.
But
It's excellent, yeah.
But we do appreciate all the volunteer hours and time and effort you and everybody puts into it. It makes the county look good, and that's what we're after. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. A very positive event for the county to take away every year, and I do appreciate that Commissioner Schroeder acknowledging hundreds of hours put in by hundreds of volunteers, whether it be through the 4-H and the leadership of the Extension Office, but also within our own county, and just everyone in this room coming alongside. I see Sherry and her, her department supports us so much, and there's so much extra work that goes into that. Monty with Road and Bridge and the extra hours they put in. It really is a team event, and so I appreciate that very much, and thank you so much for giving us the pleasure of hosting this wonderful event.
Again,
Just again to say thank you.
Thank you.
yeah, and I would say, and absolutely appreciate you recognizing Gary's efforts. Just a huge impact he made in the short period of time, and in his memory, that those improvements will continue.
Yes, and we were excited to see construction is beginning on the new pavilion, and that is, if I may make a suggestion, a Gary Warhay Pavilion would be an appropriate title for that building.
Well, thank you for that. Just one quick one. Do you anticipate changes to your board in the coming year, or?
So you will see the list of current board members. That is not, that is a current list of those that I believe will serve through their term. We did lose Mr. Scott Moranville, who has resigned off the board effective December 1. And we are currently working with our attorney. We are revising bylaws in an attempt and kind of a hope to make the board a little bit smaller, but then we do, just an update for you gentlemen, we do anticipate a new market sale committee coming alongside under the umbrella of the Fair Board. Our relationship with the Friends of Fair has ended and will end effective this month. And so in January, there will be a new market sale committee. We will be redoing some bylaws and some fun changes that hopefully will allow a very seamless change as far as the kids are concerned. Nobody's going to notice the difference, but a big task ahead of the Fair Board for 2025 is certainly developing a new market sale committee, market sale plan, Elbert County Foundation to support the market sale. Those are the things that we'll be tasked, Bart and I, with in the next coming months.
Okay. Well, again, I just truly appreciate the work of the board and the vision that you bring. Fair just continues to get better and better. So.
Absolutely.
And so you're president for life, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, we'll see if the board agrees, but at least through next October.
There you go. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, guys.
Callie, did you have anything you wanted to add, or? Your name was invoked, so I'd offer you the time if you'd like it. Yeah.
Good morning, Callie Benson, Elbert County Extension Director. What I would like to do is just reiterate all of the hard work and dedication that this Volunteer Fair Board does for this community as a whole. Obviously, I'm very partial to it with our programming, with our 4-H'ers and across the board, Master Gardeners and all the community members that we serve, but the fair really does give us an opportunity to highlight our community, be able to educate, be able to involve everyone, and it's just so amazing the work and dedication that this group does for such a wonderful community and to create a really premier event for everyone. It's just absolutely fantastic, and We're so blessed to have this board, to have Tammy's leadership, and I can't imagine being in a different location having this type of success without them.
Anything? So, thank you.
That's all. I just want to say something.
And while we have our fair queens here, could Kelly and Tammy and our queen and princess come on up and we'll get a picture. So. John brought his camera up. We got a picture. Alrighty, that, I believe, concludes our staff reports. We'll open now for citizen public comment. This is an opportunity for folks to address issues that aren't going to be covered on the agenda today. We'd ask anybody coming up to give their name and address for the record and keep their comments to about 3 minutes. If there's questions that come up that we can answer, we'll address those at the end of the public comment period. So with that, I open for public comment. Do we have any? Sir.
Good morning, Commissioners. Don Gray, 16,000 Highway 86. Excel has put in an application, and the process has begun. The ECA, which I'm a member of the board, we would ask that the Mark's office at the CDS would continue to hold the feet to the fire. And we've reviewed it through the applications. There's a lot of information that they checked a box on, but there's more questions that need to be answered in those boxes. And that's our hope, is moving forward through the CDS and then through planning and eventually to your guys' desk, that we can have some resolution to what they're doing. As a landowner, once again, we got a letter. They've sent out last and final offers to most of the landowners within the county. The reduced offers, what they've been saying for 3 years has come to be, to put it bluntly, not necessarily the truth of what really happened. They've told us one thing and other things have happened. Without going into individual circumstances, they're basically forcing us back into eminent domain. If you don't take their last and final offer, they're going to take it by eminent domain. Now, they have reduced some of the acreages that they're taking, meaning they won't need as much property as they originally thought, because a lot of the route runs along CDOTs, and they've supposedly got approval through CDOT to use part of that easement. So the acreage reduces, but the view shed never changes. They're still destroying the main part of this county by running this line through the route. Our hope is still that we can force them to choose a more practical route. But as we're moving forward, they're tightening in on us. So we would ask that, how does that process, if I could ask Bart how that process, if he understands how eminent domain would work for the actual landowners within the county. They've given us a process, but once again, I don't believe what they're telling me. My attorney tells me one thing. We'd ask Bart what the county, if indeed the county has any standing in that issue. Thank you for your time, and thanks for listening to us for 3 years going on. It was supposed to be a 6-month thing, but here we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Do we have any other? Carrie?
Good morning, Commissioners. Carrie Giblets, 19656 Wiedemeyer Road, Elbert County Environmental Alliance. I was going to ask the same thing that Dawn did about if you could explain the process of eminent domain for our citizens who might be pushed into that corner. And then just to jump on something that Dawn said about viewshed, Excel is claiming that because the lines are co-located along 86, where there are some power lines, it is only an incremental increase in the infrastructure and will not be obstructing the viewshed much. I would offer that maybe a more comparable route for an incremental increase would be through Rush Creek, where it truly is comparable. I mean, you don't see Highway 86 from miles away. You don't see those power lines from miles away. You would see the transmission poles for miles. It's not incremental. So, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Do we have any other? Okay. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. And appreciate your comments. And obviously, we've kind of shifted into a new phase with the application formally submitted. There's a little less that we should say or accept as comment during these meetings, but I would encourage, I believe the 30th of this month is when we return staff comments for additional input on the original application. So if the Alliance or any individuals that have looked through their application have questions that you feel should be answered or that aren't covered well or thoroughly in the application, please get those to Mark and we'll integrate them where it's appropriate into the response that goes back to them. As for eminent domain, I know we've discussed it a few times here. They have no authority of eminent domain until they have an approval. We can probably put together something a little more, handout-wise or get some public information out there on the process by which they have it, but they don't have that authority until or unless they get a final approval, either from the county and as a, like I said, we've gone through that long process that can go back and forth if the county decides something and somebody doesn't like it and the PUC overrides it, there's still the options for those withstanding to ask for reconsideration of the PUC. So this could still be a very lengthy process before or until or if they actually get an approval. But throughout that, I have certainly confidence that Commissioner Schroeder and certainly the two incoming commissioners are going to work through the process as they have to, but in a manner that gets the best outcome for the county and the citizens that we possibly can. So, yeah, I too am a little disappointed that the timing is the way it was. I mean, I wasn't eager to see the project come forward 3 years ago, but I kind of wish that Grant and I had the opportunity to see it through, but timing being what it is, we will not. So, but maybe sitting in your seats in the coming year. So, but thank you for that. Public comment is closed. We've got quite a few discussion items and some pretty substantial items today. The first is a discussion regarding an update to a resolution for fire protection for folks that are outside of actually incorporated fire districts. And this came up quite a few years ago. Actually, I think probably, I believe when Danny Wilcox was still a commissioner, so in our first 2 years that we had a land use application come in, and the property itself was actually in what was considered a no man's land. It had no fire protection district, so we had put together, in cooperation with the fire districts and the sheriff as the fire marshal for the county, a process by which folks could either pay a cash in lieu amount to a servicing fire district in order to get a will serve letter, or go forward into incorporating themselves. And I guess we haven't changed the amounts of the in lieu of for many years, and I'm not sure if, I guess I'll let you present from there. Thanks, Eric.
Eric Larson, Economic Development Specialist for the county. I get the next two items. The first of these is the Fire Protection District Inclusion Resolution. As you noted, this updates that resolution from 2018. There were some issues with it, first of which was the amount was never set to adjust with inflation. So the new resolution does provide for an inflation adjustment on it, on the past amount. In addition, there are some technicalities and some administrative items within the original resolution that were never set, never given, offices were never truly given responsibility for this. The reality of this particular resolution is that we haven't had to use it. So we've never stress tested the actual, like, how this would go down. But in thinking about it this past fall when a case came in, or this summer when a case came in, we realized we never assigned responsibilities to individual offices, and really the resolution just needed some tweaks around the edges to make it executable, should we ever have to use it. Honestly, we hope we never actually do have to use it. We hope that the fee drives folks in no man's land outside of the fire protection districts into fire protection districts. But frankly, it's a much better deal for them. However, if we do actually have to execute it now, this resolution sets some administrative rules for how we would actually do it. I should also mention that I did get a comment from Debbie Ullum, a citizen in the county, asking why 900 square feet was a trigger for requiring inclusion. In theory, 900 feet would be a large accessory building. If a residence isn't put on the property at the same time, really the residents should drive that particular fire inclusion in the fire protection district. However, the resolution currently, or the old resolution, sets a trigger at 900 square feet. So there's still some room for discussion about what the actual triggers may need to be. And again, I just needed to make sure that I got that on record, that Debbie had contacted us and that was her concern about it. The rest of it is relatively straightforward. I think in working in conjunction with both the emergency manager and finance, as well as Bart and the attorney's office, makes we still may have a little bit of work to do on this, and certainly there's room for discussion on it. But this gets it on to the kind of opens it up for discussion, both by yourselves, the rest of the staff, and the community.
I'm trying to remember from 2018 when we approved this back then. Less than 20% of the county is in no man's land. It's a relatively small area.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit.
Okay, good.
The process by which this was brought about initially was there was a fire that had occurred that many of our fire districts responded to. It was out northeast, I believe, if I recall correctly. It was in one of those areas that was not currently serviced at the time by any fire district, meaning there were no fire protection district taxes that were being paid, but there was certainly a lot of effort and expense that was metered out in bringing that particular fire under control. And so that was something that, in discussion with essentially all of the fire protection districts themselves and the chiefs, we were able to come up with a solution that encouraged properties that were not in fire protection districts as far as being included in those, and it's pretty rare. I think it's only about 10% of the total of the county, to tell you the truth. Mostly in the rural areas of the county, obviously. But to kind of encourage, as there is development there, that is going to need potential fire protection to drive that process. And so, as Eric was saying, this is something that has really actually been successful in allowing properties as they have become developed to go ahead and become part of those fire protection districts, and it's worked really well. This particular update does update and edit and include certain things that we've learned over the years are going to be excuse me, important to have as part of that. And so a lot of credit goes to Eric, a lot of credit goes to OEM and Aaron, really looking at this process and coming up with some of those updates. And so I'd encourage moving forward with this. I think it is a good update as is. Thank you.
So just to clarify, make sure I'm tracking properly, if there's development taking place on a piece of property in no man's land, they would pay the fee if they wanted to continue to remain in no man's land, or if they join the fire department district, then that fee's not applicable anymore.
Correct. Yeah, the fee is something we looked at pretty hard initially, as far as what your cost is typically going to be if a fire is responded to, what the labor costs and material costs and those sort of things are going to be. And so that was really the reason that the cost that's in there was included. But as discussed, most people look at the price tag and say, okay, what would it cost if I was actually paying taxes to a fire protection district, and it's substantially cheaper, much cheaper. So most people end up doing that. In fact, as Eric alluded to, we have not had a person that says, okay, I don't want to be a part of fire protection district moving forward. So that option has been chosen 100% of the time.
And we this past summer, where a case actually came in and kind of triggered this discussion to update this, the hardest part, honestly, was making sure that the fire protection districts, our mostly volunteer, knew how the inclusion process actually went down and how it's done. And so we offered assistance, in this case it was Northwest, that needed just a hand in making sure that if somebody does want to be included, what's the process, what does that look like, how much time is it going to take, and what's the paperwork going to look like. And so we offered our assistance in providing whatever help we could to make sure that both sides of that knew what they were getting into. And again, the option was to seek inclusion. And so we continue to find ways of encouraging, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, ways of getting folks into the fire protection districts.
Yeah, I was going to say that was kind of been my understanding, that over the years, inclusion has been the choice. So, and as I read the draft, there is a mechanism where if somebody chooses initially to pay the in lieu of fee, so they can move forward with improvements over the next 10 years, they have the ability to seek inclusion and have that returned, with those monies returned. What I was a little unclear on, what happens at the end of 10 years? That's the length, apparently, we can hold those monies. Do we anticipate, and I guess the other is this money pooled, or is it dedicated to that one property? So if there is a tremendously expensive response in no man's land, is it capped at that amount for that one parcel, or does the reimbursement tap into the entire fund?
And honestly, that's something that as I envisioned it when we set it up, it would be an individual account for an individual parcel, not a pooled one. And then so our impact fee resolutions use 10 years as a general guide for what, if you collect it, then you got to spend it within 10 years. This one never said the original never said how long we would potentially hold it, when it would, and what the disposition of it would be. I think as we have it on paper here, it would go to specifically to emergency management for them to roll into their general fund and the hope would be that would be for training, that would be for equipment, that would be for something that would actually improve the situation out in those no man's districts. And so that's the way we envision it. Again, we've got some room. There's still room for discussion and tweaking this one around the edges.
I would ask you to kind of think through that piece again. I mean, with an impact fee, the intent is not to hold the money, but to use it to actually address the impacts. I'm assuming at year 10, we don't go out and set a fire just to make sure the money is spent. But if a fire happens on that parcel in year 11, and we've dispersed the money internally for training, that's an awesome use of it, but that doesn't potentially address a problem if there actually is a fire. So doing things perpetually, probably not great, but and I guess I'd go to the attorney on this one because I don't want to force people into things we don't have authority to do, but at some point it may be using a portion of that money to support the process of inclusion. That there'll be a recognition that if this money's not, if you don't take steps on your own to include yourself and get your total amount back, that the county will initiate a process or through the fire districts to include you. And that may take half of your money and the rest will be returned or something to that effect. But again, I'm not sure if we're tripping over the authority we have to force somebody to incorporate. So I don't want to do that if not. And on the square footage, I think it'd be just simple to say any permitted structure. And that way, I mean, we moved from 100 feet to 200 square feet in the 8 years I've been here. If it moves up to 400, you know, we're going to have the same discussion. And so I think probably just any permitted work would be a trigger. I mean, as I think Ms. Olam noted, that you can have fires that you have to fight even if there's no structure, but there is no triggering event unless somebody walks in and wants something from the county. So anything else? Anything public comment on this? If not, I think there's a few little things to work on, but I'm glad you took it forward to update. So thanks.
I think I get the next one too.
All right, since you're here, we'll move on to this resolution regarding revising and revoking cash in lieu of open space option.
And this one is just another one that in the course of the past year, we've actually had to figure out how this administratively works. We have figured that out, but the cash in lieu of open space has been a way of capturing some capturing some impact fee and moving it forward into using it for parks, trails, and open space. Where a parcel is, or where a subdivision is small enough that they can't actually dedicate the space. In most of our larger subdivisions, they actually they use space within the subdivision as parks, trails, and open space, and so they can dedicate land into that into the open space. However, smaller subdivisions, rather than dedicate, take away space from lots, they are simply providing cash in lieu of that open space. If it's paid up front, it's typically no frills, no problems. We have in the past, and part of the original resolution was to give people an opportunity to pay that fee later after the sale, basically to use sale revenue to pay the open space fee. It has proven difficult in administration to catch up to those fees after the sale. It requires knowing that first it requires proper documentation up front. It requires knowing when a sale happens. It requires a couple of follow-up steps in there to make sure that we're getting documents from the recorder. We're providing documents back to the recorder. It's a much longer process than I think we originally thought it might be, working back and forth with the buyer, the seller, the treasurer's office, the clerk and recorder, et cetera, et cetera. And so the discussion has been to remove that. All cash in lieu fees would now be forced to upfront in the transaction, and it would ultimately reduce the administrative burden and room for errors in that administrative process for for us as staff. And so that's the origins of the cash in lieu of open space changes and update to the resolution.
Questions or comments?
Yeah, one of the things, the reason we initiated that cash in lieu, it had to do with what I'm going to call mom and pop taking care of an estate and some things like that, and the money wasn't available up front. But and it was also, we put the cash in lieu in there because if you have 10 or 20% of 40 acres, it's not really useful on a county-wide basis, and that was the reason why we wanted the funds. But coming back to the administrative part of it, I guess I'm a little bit puzzled by this. To me, the easiest way to handle that would be to have a condition of approval that you record a title issue. So therefore, when they sell the property, they would have to clean that title up, which would be bringing the check. So from an administrative point of view, that would be the easiest solution, and it would still leave the intent of the cash in lieu in place.
Yeah, and I can speak to that a little bit. I think the intent certainly was intended to help, intended to provide an additional option for folks that may not have funds up front. What we have found is the practicality of this is very difficult to track, to ensure that processes that the county has no involvement in are acknowledged or known by the county in order to actually receive that fee at a later date instead of up front. And so from a practical standpoint, it has not worked well, if at all. The tracking it's much too easy for something to fall through the cracks.
But that's easily solvable by having it included as a title restriction.
I mean, you're talking about essentially putting a lien on a property up front.
Yes.
And so there's also other practicalities to consider. So this is an option. I think this is the recommendation of the folks that actually deal with the process and have run into the problems of the cash in lieu delay as opposed to the upfront fee. And I think this is the recommendation of them to go ahead and move forward with this, just so from a practical standpoint, there's not a lot of additional efforts and that sort of thing by the county. I can tell you this process is not followed by other jurisdictions, and for good reason, because of the hardships and challenges that are associated with it. It's the practicality is something that other jurisdictions have run into and have decided not to move forward with that sort of a process. So certainly I think that is another way that the issues could be addressed. I think this is what is being put forward as a recommended approach. And I think, the decision is ultimately up to the board.
Yeah, I have some additional questions on this as well. Then this summary, it discusses that there's times staff has to go back and do research to make sure that these fees have been collected. Do we have a number on that about how many have fallen through the cracks, or what kind of dollar amount that we're talking about here?
I don't actually think that any have fallen through the cracks. I think we've been somewhat blessed by having a former commissioner down in the title office who understands when this has shown up, that he knows to come to us, he knows what the process is supposed to look like. So we've been, frankly, maybe a little bit lucky in that the experience that we've had, we haven't had anybody slip through the cracks. But by my really back of the envelope calculation, I think we've probably had I know of at least two subdivisions, two smaller subdivisions that have used this, and I believe that there's either a third or a fourth out there somewhere in the system. Again, our own tracking mechanisms on this one are proving difficult, because if something was moved into this category, say 3-4 years ago, in staff turnover and sort of our own record keeping, we may have lost track of it, and it's only by having a note on the plat that we've been able to go back and discover this. That's our primary mechanism. Again, a lot of that just depends on a smart title search, understanding what they're seeing on the plat and coming to us to clear it out.
I guess that was the next place I was going. There is a mechanism at the title level with it on the plat for it to be observed. And so if it is missed somewhere along the line, and you have a 4-lot subdivision and it got missed on the first 2, and suddenly the third one, a different title company or whatever pops up, and it becomes aware that those weren't paid, then there should be a mechanism to go back and collect those fees. I had a similar experience when we refinanced our home in 2017. Again, it was former Commissioner Pettit. Norman noticed that the school impact fees originally had never been paid when the house was first built in 2007. And so he noted that, so it was going to be a problem. But because during our refinancing process, or when we first purchased it, we had title insurance, it was able to go back to the title insurance company. They're the ones that missed it. It was their problem, and the school got their money. So there is a mechanism even down the road for that to be caught. My concern with this is that it's unfair to this small, medium landowner to pay all those fees up front, and then if there's a downturn in the economy or there's a change in family situation or whatever, they may have paid all those fees, and it may be years down the road before they sell those other lots. And that just seems prohibitive to me. Not that I want to put a lot of administrative burden on staff. I'm sympathetic to that. But I think we need to keep the citizens' options available to them as well. Again, in my own little world, I live in a 4-lot subdivision. My house was built in 2007. The rest of the houses in my little cul-de-sac weren't built till 2014, 2015. And so that would have meant that person that was developing or subdividing or whatever the situation was there had paid those fees and had no return for 7 or 8 years on those lots. And I have a concern on what that could do to the smaller person. So I would like to maybe find a better way to streamline how we can track that. I'm curious if our new software from Safe Built can help that, if there's a way we can plug in on a specific lot, maybe when it's addressed at the assessor's office, that this needs to be paid and it triggers it. But I'd like to see some alternatives than just that we just need to stop doing it this way.
Yeah, I might suggest let's, I guess, there is a level of discomfort here, so I think we should probably just schedule a study session sometime in the next couple of weeks so we know what all the concerns are, and then perhaps bring in Rick or some others that have pieces of the process. Because again, I mean, I don't want to say it reads like, well, this is hard for us, so we're going to take an opportunity away from our citizens, but we need to do it right. And if again, I don't want to overly burden what began a long time ago with the minor subdivision that was really designed to allow somebody to split off a small piece of property for their kids, and that turned out to be lengthy and expensive, and then abused by small developers into serial minor subdivisions, and so we're always kind of learning how good intentions sometimes go awry on either side, but I think we'll get something scheduled to just sit down and make sure we're addressing the issues we were trying to address originally with this.
Yeah, I think there's other options that are available, certainly as Commissioner Thayer was stating, to maybe shore up some of the circumstances that have proved challenging. So we can get together and kind of brainstorm what some of those will be and perhaps put a work study session together.
I mean, the overall cash in lieu is, I mean, when you look at the county-owned properties, we've got 50, 60, 70 little scraps of triangles that nobody can access. They're not maintained. They could be fire dangers. They did nothing for the average citizen of the county, even though it accumulates to a large amount of open space. So, you know, bundling it the way they did as cash that we could then use for improvements or purchase of larger parcels of land is still the right approach. It's just how do we get there? So, thanks. All righty. Okay, thank you. Unless you'd like to talk about the, I mean, we've got, you can talk about the inmate health care. No. Dave? So yeah, the next item we've got is the third amended and restated agreement for inmate health care from WellPath.
Commissioners, Chad Church, Lieutenant with the Elbert County Sheriff's Office, and I'm the jail commander.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. I know we've been working with WellPath for several years, and I know we went out for bid to look at potential other options and came back to WellPath. Is there any specifics on this you have concerns with? Or?
Well, we've been with this company for over a decade. It was Correct Care Solutions, now it's WellPath. We're very happy with their services. The costs were going up, so the undersheriff put it out for RFP. We had bids on, from 3 correctional health care companies. It appeared to me that the services and costs were fairly comparable, and we rated their proposals, and WellPath came out on top. We are very happy with WellPath. They do a great job for us in the jail with the inmates, with the national standards, policies, so forth. What questions can I answer?
Any questions or comments?
Just a curiosity question. Do you have a lot of health issues in the jail?
Very much, very much. I would say the vast majority have some sort of medical or mental health issue, and WellPath does provide mental health services as well.
And the length of this contract is the year?
This one is a year.
Yes. A year. So we got to do it all over again next year?
We can continue, Undersheriff.
It's renewable. It's renewable? Okay.
But in this case, this does get us to a completely kind of restated new contract. This is not just a renewal of the old, or do we have a kind of the full statement of their scope of services? I know for several years as we were doing the updates, we'd kind of lost track because of the name change and the change in the company. The original base contract was.
I would call this amended and restated.
Okay.
It would include the entirety of the services. We're not really adding anything. Really, the pricing has changed, obviously, but much of this is unchanged from what we have seen in the recent past. And I think with the quality of care that we've received, we really haven't seen a lot of problems with the provision of those services. And I didn't see anything that I was especially concerned about in this particular contract.
Amended and restated, so we have essentially a clean copy to start with going forward.
Correct.
I appreciate that. And this is to start January 1st?
Yes.
Okay, so unless there's an issue, we've got a meeting next Wednesday, so we can put this on consent and get it approved and signed and back to them if that's timing works for them. I'm not sure when they need. sorry, Dave.
Dave Fisher, Undersheriff. I'm sure we could make some agreements with them to carry on if the signature is delayed for some reason.
Okay, yeah, I would anticipate we'd just put it on
There is
consent
only
for
one
approval
issue
next
with-
week, so there's some time to.
I'm sorry?
I said I was just suggesting we put it on consent to approve next week. We generally take things for discussion at least once before moving to approval, but.
Okay.
Alrighty, thanks. Much appreciated. And again, also very much appreciated going out with the RFP to see if there were cheaper options. So. Alrighty, so moving on. Discussion of the Elbert County Water Master Plan. A little side project that's been going on.
Well, good morning, Commissioners. I'm Mark Denrader, Director of Community and Economic Development for Elbert County Government. So we are here today to present the Elbert County Water Master Plan project. It is in its final draft form for your consideration. With me here today to present, we have Will Koger with Forsgren, also Bill Franzak from LRE Water, and then Eric Larson again from my team. First, I'd like to just step back a moment and kind of just do a little refresh on how we arrived at embarking on a water master plan and bring us to present day. As you know, this is not the first time that we have undertaken a water-related task, taken on an initiative. In recent years, there have been 2 other water-focused projects that have led us up to this project. The first one, well, not necessarily in order, but the first one I'll mention is the 2018 Rural Water Supply Study. That one was a study that was developed for Elbert County to examine basically the reliability of the current and future water supplies based on projected growth scenarios. The other project, that one started in 2015, and that was the USGS, the United States Geological Survey Groundwater Monitoring Study. So this study has been ongoing since 2015, and that is monitoring groundwater levels in Elbert County on about 40 individual wells, household wells, and just monitoring and analyzing the trends and changes on those wells. So in the county's comprehensive plan, as you are aware, it was recommended that we consider putting together a water master plan. So kind of take it to that next step from that 2018 study and build on those 2 previous projects mentioned. So we decided to do it. We also decided to go after some grant monies. Eric and I actually went up to the South Platte Basin Roundtable to present our case for a grant. It was recommended for approval, and then from there, it was sent up to the Colorado Water Conservation Board, the CWCB, and they considered it, and then we ended up receiving a grant for $45,000 to assist us with this project. We then hired a consultant, Forsgren, and then as part of that Forsgren team, there was Logan Simpson and then LRE Water to help with this plan. So that's basically the time frame. About 2023, September-ish is when this launched. And we formed a steering committee. We conducted several public engagement and outreach type efforts, came up with some policy recommendations. There was more public engagement after that. And then the draft document was put together. The report was presented to the Planning Commission last month. They reviewed it and had a few recommendations. That was in the staff report presented for this meeting. And then Eric will cover more of that later. So that all takes us up to today. Overall, the Water Master Plan, it's a project to evaluate the long-term water supply in Elbert County, and it looks at conservation options and policy opportunities as well. In essence, this plan provides us I think it's more of just that basis. It's that starting point now where we can really help us, since there's more of a comprehensive look at what our future planning opportunities can be as it relates to our water supply. So Will and Bill, just give you a little touch point on what they're going to cover. They're going to talk about the goals of the plan, the public engagement, go into more detail on that, groundwater analysis, what did that yield, water management strategies, and then they're going to touch on the recommendations. That's really the real important piece of this and what we can do in terms of action items. After Will and Bill present, then Eric will take the mic, and he's going to talk more about those recommendations that were outlined in the document, and then he'll cover some key takeaways and look at what we can consider here as a county as it relates to water. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Will Coker from Forsgren, and he will present you with some more detail about the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Okay, we'll start with an overview of the Water Master Plan. We are going to cover what the goals are of the plan, our pretty robust public engagement efforts that were included, as Mark said. Also reviewing the water demands that are projected through 2050, and then an analysis of the groundwater available to meet those demands. That all leads to then some water management strategies we'll discuss, and finally the recommendations at the end. Okay, with regard to the goals for the master plan, one is very important one is to engage with the public and get public feedback on water issues, water concerns. Also to understand the future water demands, and then compare those water demands with the groundwater supplies available to meet those demands and do an analysis of those supplies. Also to review water management practices throughout the county, and finally to recommend policies based on analyzing the supplies and demands. So with regard to public engagement, there was significant outreach. We had questionnaires to the public. There were updates on the county website. There were emails distributed to folks that had expressed interest in the Water Master Plan. There also were articles in newspapers, social media reaching out to over 1,200 people. Had flyers, and also had a steering committee that helped us throughout the process. And Mr. Weatherby here was on that steering committee. We had a community survey that had over 600 respondents on that. We had over 100 people attend an open house. And then toward the end of the process, we had a public meeting for focus groups that gave us some feedback on those policy recommendations. So this shows where the public engagement responses came from, and you can see that by the size of the circle there that the main area that we received comments from, that was from Elizabeth over toward the Douglas County line, that biggest circle there. Also, the Kiowa area is next smaller, and then also an area out there out toward Hilltop Road as you go into Douglas County. So who did we hear from? By far, the majority of people were people that live in Elbert County, and then there were some others that work here or own a business here in the county. The demographic on age is that nearly 48% were in the 46 to 65-year-old category, with about a third of the respondents 65 or older. So we asked folks to rank their biggest water-related concerns on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the most important to 10 least important. And as you see, the most important categories that folks had concerns about were water demand by new development and household water supply, and as well as water quality and water rights and legal issues. Water conservation and efficiency was about middle of the pack there. And this was a chart that we had at the draft. It was for draft policy input at the open house. And folks were encouraged to put a circle a dot on those things they agreed with or disagreed with or that they were neutral on. And this is just an example of some of the things that we asked about. And down about a third, halfway on the left-hand side, you see the one that had the most agreement, which was to annually review the water master plan based on the most recent data available through USGS or other regional, state, and national sources. But all these categories were graded by the public as to what their agreement was with these policy questions. So we know we have a growing population, and in 2020, Colorado's population was about 5.8 million people. Elbert County was over 26,000. And then in the planning projections from the State Demographer's Office, now the 2050 population is projected to be 7.5 million, with Elbert County going to just over 35,000 by 2050. Now we found that those updated projections were far less than what the earlier projections were that we used for the 2018 water supply study. Those projections were based on, also from the State Demographer's Office, but from our last study, we had those 2050 projections showed 8.5 million people projected for the state of Colorado, with Elbert County coming in at over 68,000 by 2050. So there's a dilemma here as to which projections you use. And so we determined that we had a lot of feedback from the public about, well, there's just a lot of growth going on. Even if the numbers don't show it, we're concerned about what the future holds. And so based on that, we thought it's best to use a worst case scenario, and let's go ahead and use those higher projections for the analysis that we performed on groundwater supplies. So this is a graph from the earlier study from 2018, and what this shows is there's some different categories. Starting with the top, there's oil and gas, which is just a really thin line projected through 2050. And these are annual demands in acre feet per year of different demands on the Denver Basin groundwater. The light gray is livestock below that. And then the goldenrod is irrigated agriculture. And all of those categories really are fairly constant through 2050, not a lot of change in those. But what you see is the light green is the commercial, and the blue is the residential demand. And so when you look at commercial and residential demands, those are up over 11,000 acre feet per year, and that's approximately twice what the projections would be if we used just the latest state demographer projections. So with that, Bill is going to discuss the water supply findings with you.
Good morning, Commissioners. So yeah, we were tasked with Ellery Water. We were tasked to review the 2018 water supply or rural water supply study, and take a good deep dive into that and really look at kind of the state engineer's regulations and rules as it applied. If you recall, in the 2018 study, there was a USGS basis model that was a finite model that was used to estimate the amount of water in all four aquifers, the upper Dawson, lower Dawson, Denver, Arapahoe, and Fox Hills. Actually, it's five. To really take a look at what that volume was, and then kind of look at comparing that to how they're looking at their water level measurements as they've gone across the state or across the county, since 2015. So we took a look at that and did some ground truthing to kind of look at, what is out there, using state engineer rules and policy, which is overlying land ownerships, saturated thickness, specific yields, so on and so forth. As we know, it's just kind of a basis. Surface water and alluvial groundwater out here are very limited. Most of the alluvial groundwater is east. It's in the designated basin. That's going to be in the Kiowa-Bijou designated basin. That's outside the North Kiowa-Bijou groundwater management district. There are some alluvial wells that are along some of the surface water drainages as you get closer towards Douglas County, but again, those are very limited. There's not a lot of water resources in that regard, and those are all controlled when you get to the streams by the water court and in priority underneath the Constitution of the state. Bulk of the water is Denver Basin groundwater, is what we know. We've seen a lot of individual on-lot wells and subdivisions, new subdivisions with larger wells, and so on and so forth. as just a general kind of figure of the Denver Basin and groundwater aquifers, there are 5, but I really call it 4. I mean, the Dawson is divided into 2 in certain parts of the county, but it's the Dawson, the Denver, the Arapahoe, and the Fox Hills. And the Arapahoe is also divided into 2 aquifers as you head north up into the Arapahoe County, Adams County area. But these are all separate and distinct aquifers until you get out to the fringes, and they are not connected in geologic time. I mean, I guess in a theory, in 1,000,000 years, you may see connections between the aquifers. From geologic, they're not. And we know that because there's different pressures in these aquifers. If you drill a well into the Fox Hills, you're going to see a water level shoot up in the well bore to a certain level, which will be different than the Arapahoe or the Denver or the Dawson. So, and they're also not a contiguous, nice, bed of sand, or what people sometimes think of as a bathtub of water underground the ground. Very complex geological formations. There are a lot of shales. There's a lot of coals. There's other issues that affect water quality as well as productivity. So, we've seen wells that are installed in the same aquifer within a quarter mile of each other have dramatically different production. So it is a complex system. The state has been evaluating this since the early 1900s. The rules and regulations were passed in 1973, and updated in 1985. And they're constantly being updated with new data that comes in as required with geophysical logs. So the state is constantly looking at this data, trying to refine what's there, but as you can imagine, it's a very large aquifer to be able to deal with. As we've noticed, and one thing, another thing we were tasked with is to update that 2018 study to really look at what has the state done in the county with regard to issuance of well permits. And as you can see here, the wells that are constructed have increased, a little over, right around 800, ballpark, 600 to 800 well permits. And the way we looked at this was new well permits that were issued. There's also well permits that have expired, that were issued, in this time period that did not get constructed, and then the state expired these, or wells that were re-drilled. We didn't count as a new well permit. So the bulk of this is what we call as other, which is not domestic, which is other means that it's either livestock, commercial, municipal, these type things. Domestic is really those individual on-lot wells. Those really haven't grown, and we'll show you in a map here in a little bit. A lot of the subdivisions that rely on individual on-lot wells that are less than 35 acres in size have already been pretty much built out, and there's wells out there right now. So there's not a lot of growth with those individual wells. There are on some of those 35-acre parcels or those larger parcels that the state can still issue well permits on, but those smaller ones, there's just not a lot of them, though, that are going on here in the county in the last 5 years. And this is the map that I was talking to you about. As we look at where the state engineer's wells are in Elbert County, and we focused here we've excluded, the very small, not very small, but the southeastern part of the county, the little leg that down there, and really looked at the kind of the focus area of where water development is. You see a lot of water development along the Douglas County line in the western part of the county and also in the northwest part of the county. All those green dots are individual on-lot wells, and they're related to subdivisions that rely on individual on-lot wells. Most of these wells are constructed in the upper Dawson and the lower Dawson, which makes sense because they're not as deep and it's not as expensive to go ahead and drill those wells. You can see some other developments in there, and that's what the blue lines are the major subdivisions as designated by the county. Some of the ones that have more open, less green in the box are those developments that are relying on those larger wells that are typically drilled into the Denver, Arapahoe, and Fox Hills. They go deeper. And for 2 reasons. One, most of that water in the upper Dawson and lower Dawson has been adjudicated, or there's well permits that have been issued, or it's just simply not a usable resource because the upper Dawson is impacting the alluvial aquifers, thereby requiring a replacement plan by the water courts of the state, and it's a complicated process. It's, it's something that people really can't, an individual landowner really can't do unless they have older lots or lots of a certain size. Total designated Denver Basin groundwater use between 2018 and 2023 has increased about 4,000 acre feet. And this is a result as there has been some which the commissioners are probably aware, there's been some large developments that have come online or been approved where larger wells have been approved by the state. Now, that doesn't mean that those subdivisions are fully built out, but this is what we've estimated as a total groundwater use based upon well construction logs that, you'll get a well permit that says you may have 100 gallon a minute and X number of acre feet. When you actually construct the well, the aquifer is releasing 50 gallons a minute. So there is a difference on how much is there. Now, they can put in more wells and try to get that appropriation out of the aquifer, but then you start running into issues with well-to-well interference and some other types of issues that come up when you start putting in too many wells on one piece of property. But this is what as we did the research in the state engineer's records, about 4,100 acre feet of water has been approved by the state through permitting or through decree in the last 5 years, or since between 2018 and 2023. The change in storage, and again, as Will indicated, in 2018, using the finite model from the USGS, the estimated of storage was about 54 million, acre feet of water in all 4 aquifers. And the change in storage based upon the use and the projection was less than 1%. We confirmed that. Even with the increase of the 4,000 over the last 5 years, we confirmed that that's about what the change in storage will be in about 2050. There is a significant amount of water in the Fox Hills. Granted, it's economically hard to get to in certain areas of the county, but as you move further east, there's obviously the aquifers pinch out.
Just,
yes, sir.
I heard you right. That's about a 1% decline over the 32-year period?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, as you can see, there's not much impact in the Fox Hills or in the Arapahoe, but there's still 2 large buckets of water. Again, those are deep to get to. The individual landowner closer to the Douglas County line is going to have a hard time affording a well to go 2,000 feet. I mean, that's going to be expensive, just from the size of the well, the depth of the well, and the pump that's necessary to get the water to the surface. So you're going to see, that pretty much stay unchanged. We have also noticed as we've gone through the groundwater conclusions, we can kind of walk through this, is that again, as I just mentioned, that this change is less than 1% in 2050 in the overall storage of the Denver Basin aquifers in the county. Now, this does not include impacts that may be resulting of other counties that are surrounding. The Denver Basin doesn't act like a big bathtub, though, where if we're pulling water from, say, Parker, it's going to directly impact the county. It's, tight formations, complex geology, where you're going to see cones of depression, maybe localized impacts of groundwater depression, which we saw in the Highlands Ranch area back in the 90s and 2000s, where we saw significant declines in groundwater. But as they reduced their pumping on the Denver Basin, we saw, an increase in the groundwater table. So you're going to see localized declines, but you're not going to see, huge impacts from surrounding counties. Again, that is something that probably needs to be looked at and studied. We have 4 counties that are around that have done various water supply studies, but how those all interact is probably a pretty heavy lift, as they can say. So we really looked basically right at Elbert County. Denver Basin use is going to increase to 2050. It's the main water resource in the county, so it is definitely going to increase. We are going to see probably more increase in the deeper aquifers, just because those upper aquifers are either, I wouldn't say, I don't like to use the word played out, but have wells already issued or decrees or require an augmentation. And that's what I indicated in this next bullet. Current and future use will continue to lower artesian water levels. A lot of the issues that we saw in the county is that the aquifers themselves are not really declining when you get to aquifer level conditions. It's really that water that's up in the wellbore that you see that's not at the aquifer, but it raises up as due to pressures in the aquifer. Those we're seeing, those are going to continue to decline, not just a result of pumping here in Elbert County, but across the Denver Basin. As you reduce that pressure, more straws basically go into that balloon or into that aquifer, you're going to see those pressures decline. So we're going to continue to see that, but we're not going to, once it gets to aquifer conditions, you're going to see a lot less decline in water tables than, and we're seeing that as well in the USGS work as well. A lot lower declines in those water levels. water, and that's, again, what I just indicated, water levels in the unconfined, which is the aquifer conditions, are going to relatively remain stable throughout the county. They're going to have slight declines, but they're not going to be excessive. And property owners that we've noticed that are using individual well wells, that have constructed wells in the 70s and early 70s, late 70s, and into the 80s under these older subdivisions, we're seeing that the wells as they were constructed were either not constructed to the base of the aquifer that they were permitted for. Say for the upper Dawson, they weren't drilled down to 500 to 600 feet below the surface. They were stopped at 400 feet. Water was found. I mean, when you're drilling the well driller hit water and it shot up to 15, 20 feet below the surface. Said, hey, we got water there. Well, that's that piezometric water. Then the wells weren't completed all the way to the base. We don't know why. And we also seen that pumps are installed above the aquifer themselves. So we are seeing wells that are having impacts due to the decline of that artesian head, but it's not as a result of the aquifer draining as a result of those pressures being impacted. So there might be some property owners that may need to deepen wells to actually drill to the bottom of the aquifer as stated on their well permits and recommended by the state engineer. And that's it for me reviewing the groundwater. Turn it back over to Will to just walk through some of the strategies.
Okay, thanks, Bill. So given the that state of the supply, what are some things to consider in moving forward? And those are listed here. One would be we know that increasing water demands throughout the region are really prompting more efficiency. There are a number of initiatives across the region regarding water efficiency. Also, water providers are optimizing the usage within their service areas, really dialing back and doing the things that are necessary to eliminate leaks and water wasting. Water providers are also collaborating on regional efforts. Oftentimes they're looking to bring in new water supplies, renewable water supplies from some distance away, and it's those higher cost water projects that they're looking to work together on so that it makes it more affordable for each of the water providers. Also, management strategies include water conservation, particularly water conscious landscaping is much more of a thing these days than it used to be. Also, water reuse is very important. Most of the water that gets used in this region gets reused in some way downstream. And then there's also what's called conjunctive use, which is to optimize the use of your groundwater along with your surface water supplies to be more sustainable for the long term. There are some best management practices on conservation. This is from a Colorado Waterwise publication. And the first is inclining blockade structures. And what this has to do with is after the 2002-2003 drought, many water providers across the region implemented these inclining blockade structures whereby if you use higher blocks of water, particularly in the summer for irrigation, you're going to pay a higher rate for those upper blocks of water. And so it deters people from really putting a lot of water onto their landscaping and really helps them look for ways to optimize their water usage. Leak detection and repair, there are very improved technologies to identify leaks in water systems and to get those leaks fixed. And then overall, there are some water systems that are just old and have leakage because they're old and corroded, and there's maybe slower leaking, but throughout a larger area. And so in many cases, doing upgrades to the water system can improve water usage. Reuse is also a very important aspect of water use, and this is involving where if you take treated wastewater, it's cleaned up and it's ready for discharge to the environment, and you can discharge it into a river, and the water goes downstream, and that can be pulled out from a water treatment plant, and you're going downstream, and you're going to serve a community with that. That's what's called de facto reuse. Everything is downstream is somewhere else, right? And so ultimately the water gets reused in some way. But what's known as direct, or there also is reuse that can occur just within one particular water provider's service area, where you can use the treated effluent for non-potable reuse on golf courses or use it for irrigation. And it's not drinking water quality, but it's suitable for irrigation. And so that's a very important part of reuse. There also is potable reuse, and that can be oftentimes as indirect. It can be from discharging into the stream and then pulling it out downstream, or you can use the water for recharge basins to recharge aquifers, and then there's some filtering that occurs, and you can pull the water out with wells and serve a community that way. So we very much want to optimize the use of our water throughout this area. Conjunctive use, and this is often thought of with our aquifer storage and recovery. And for this particular type of use, optimizing groundwater supplies and surface water supplies, what you're looking to do is to, when you have real heavy flows in, it could be a flooding situation or free river conditions, if you can capture that water and treat it and then plug it in the ground, you can use that water to recharge the aquifers. And so you can basically bank your water for the drought years. And so a few things about this, you'd have to have a water right to make that happen. It could be a very junior water right on a surface stream. You have to meet water quality requirements. You have to have that water treated to drinking water standards before you can inject it into the Denver Basin aquifers. You need a permit from the Colorado Division of Water Resources. And as I said, this is used for drought contingency and allows you to, you would use this when you can have water available if it's a really plus year on water flows. You'd want to look at doing something like this. So that brings us to recommended policies, and Eric is going to review those with you. Eric?
Told you I'd be back. Give me 1 second to switch presentations. The content from Will's presentation shows up in mine as well, so you're not missing his excellent presentation skills. Again, by way of introduction, Eric Larson, Economic Development Specialist. As Mark mentioned, he and I have been involved in this for a really bloody long time, it feels like. And this is sort of the culmination of that. I'm gonna abuse Eisenhower's phrase. I got to tell you, a lot of this was not the plan itself, but the act of planning that made the most difference to us. In the engagement with the community, which was something that wasn't necessarily a part of the 2018, we learned a lot. We learned a lot from citizens. We learned a lot about what citizens expected from us. And so this, while I say it's not a plan, and it's, we call it a plan, but it's not policy, really all it does is set us up for a better way forward on this. So there's, in a couple of these slides are like my layman's interpretation of what we really found. The idea is there's a lot of water underneath us. Not all of it's accessible, not all of it's accessible economically, but there is a lot of water. But the hardest part in understanding what's going on with Elbert County's water is understanding that this is not the reservoirs that we would typically, this isn't Chatsworth, this isn't the Aurora Reservoir. There's a lot of stuff going on underneath us that we really don't understand and we cannot see. So we're really relying on, the well data. We're relying on the geologist kind of understanding how rock forms and how water moves within that rock. But the depiction of the whole of the aquifer as a lake does not serve us well in any way, shape, or form. So we got to understand how the aquifers work. The other piece of this, and this is something that Bill and his company have kind of given us, is when we look at water and we look at how the Division of Water Resources is assigning how much water, their sample size really ends up being about a mile by mile to understand what may be again, may be going on underneath that. That is not down to, in this particular borehole, this is what you are going to find on your way down. There's a lot of guesswork in this, and the resolution that they use doesn't necessarily help us understand every single corner of the county. And so their modeling, it's the best that we've got, but we realize there are limitations. We also know that the deeper you got to go, the more you're going to have to pay. I mean, kind of a no duh. And finally, what I distill most citizen questions down to is this one: is we're 4% of the overall aquifer. Will we get our share? Not saying that that's a selfish approach, not saying it's self-interested, but it is a very practical matter of, hey, we're a part of this bigger system. Are we going to get what we think that we sort of deserve underneath there? Will talked about water management strategies. For some of the larger water systems, the entire spectrum of options is open. You can charge higher rates to discourage use, but more realistic for the 8,000 of 12,000 in our county that are individual wells are going back to basics, understanding what your use actually is. Put a meter on your system and understand what your use is, so that if you did have a leak, you could repair it right away and not hurt yourself. There are still some water system efficiency upgrades, and new technologies continue to come online. Individual landowners can still do landscaping, and theoretically, there are some reuse and recycle options that are now available as part of on-site water treatment systems, septic systems. And so we know that those get expensive right now, but prices may eventually come down to the point where they become a more viable option for individual well holders. This is to kind of to recap what Will and his team ended up as recommended policies. The idea of asking the water question early in the planning process, honestly, that's something that we in CDS have been doing for a long time. We will continue to do that. Typically, if somebody brings a pre-application in, it's either the first question or the second question after what's your name is where are you getting your water. So we will continue to make that a part of our process. The 2015 USGS well monitoring program, there's already funding in the budget for that to continue. We need that information. We need USGS to continue to refine the model and do the well monitoring. The rest of these, just kind of down the list, obviously, some of the bigger developments economically can afford to go deeper. We'll continue to use boring log data to improve the model. New developments, whether it's, perhaps the number is within a quarter mile, perhaps the cost is less than $1 million to connect between systems where it makes sense and add some redundancy. County and suppliers, we'll talk about this quite a bit more, that, the regional renewables and understanding what's going on in our region is becoming more important. We no longer can go it alone. There are things that we can do regulatory-wise, but there's also the matter of, if Parker finds a way of using more renewable, we should support that as the county, because it may mean that they're pulling less out of the aquifer, preserving the aquifer for everybody, us included. And so more understanding of what's going on in the region, and for both renewable and for the aquifer, is going to matter as well. Drilled at the bottom of the aquifer, for those that haven't, and again, I'll talk about this a little bit more later, landscaping, water rates, and use for our metropolitan districts where those kind of make sense in the larger subdevelopments, participating outside of our own borders, where we can interconnect, it does make sense, looking at aquifer storage and recovery. And then really, I got to tell you, again, the idea of in the engagement with the community has showed us that we need much more information, much more dialogue with the public to make sure that they understand what is actually going on with water underneath us. So this really kind of leads to this. And, you guys know I'm kind of going to pull a pin on a grenade and roll it into the room, and then I'm going to walk away in a week. However, I think that these are all very doable and very necessary steps as we move forward. The recommendation by the Planning Commission, understand how we play and how we are going to interact with our surrounding counties. The Forest Green team has done the El Paso County Water Study. They've also done the Arapahoe County Water Study and are in the middle of the Douglas County. So the counties that are around us, we've got sort of a teammate ready to go and keep us informed about what's going on with other counties and the supplies around us. Part of that is also understanding who's doing what on renewables and staying engaged with that. It's probably not always going to be economically viable. You know, a pipeline all the way from Hess Reservoir under the Parker Water and Sanitation, probably not a viable option. But again, if they're doing smaller things that perhaps we can tie into along the Douglas County border, that may start to make sense for us, at least to understand what's going on with it. Doesn't mean we have to plug into it, but at least we should know it's an option. And again, this larger engagement with regional partners and organizations for the longest time, there's been a misconception that we can simply drill deep enough along, or drill a trench along our own border and cut us off from everybody else's water supply and preserve ours. That ain't going to happen. It's neither geologically possible, nor does it make a lot of sense. It does make a lot of sense to stay engaged with our regional partners. The other takeaway that I will advocate for, and in fact I've got the bylaws in draft form ready to go, and we'll hand those off, is modeled on the Noxious Weed Advisory Board, which I've been privileged to play a part in for the past couple months. A citizen water advisory board with a primary mission of leading community engagement and education on these issues, advising the commissioners, advising staff, and advising the Planning Commission on some of their own priorities and where these do the words in some of these things make sense and have the impact that we intend. I'd love to send the commissioners to every single regional water forum event so that they have a voice in those. However, I realize that you guys can't make all of those. So having a sort of a bench of folks who can go and monitor those would actually be a good duty for a future advisory board as well. And then, along with everything in government, if you're going to do something, you're probably going to have to spend money on it. And so if they've got recommendations for where to spend money, they should have that input as citizens. The bottom of that is my prioritized list of where some of these policies and spending would actually take place. A policy to force developers to drill deeper, to look at recycle reuse options, to look at all the technologies. That seems like a pretty decent place to start. Encouraging all new developments to consider system interconnections. And again, it should require some input from citizens as well as the developers to understand where the economics of that actually start to make a difference. Is it a quarter mile? Is it $1 million? What is the logical price tag and distance that we could apply to interconnection and building a resiliency across multiple systems? We're going to continue to fund that USGS monitoring. I think that kind of goes without saying. And also, like I said, this has been a learning experience for the past 18 months involved in this. I'm not a hydrogeologist, never pretend to be. And what we've found is that there are simply not that many of us. We've got to hire consultants to be the experts in this. There are some opportunities, however, to make sure that staff is better trained on the water, to use the water data that we do have, or to hire on a retainer somebody who can look at some of these things when they come up and understand and help us with that depth of knowledge to make sure that we're not just best guessing at what's going on with it, but that we've got some engineering to go along in the back of it. And then finally, I have joked about this for the past year now, is the idea of a water cop for the county. It's worth considering. I won't recommend it. However, in order to do more effective enforcement, in order to understand what really is going on with some of the, with the wells, is going to take a little bit more expertise and probably a little bit more manpower to actually do, to be able to go up to the metropolitan districts and pull their data and double check it against what their authorizations are. I mean, it's going to take manpower, and again, it's probably going to take a little bit of extra expertise. And then in the worst case, as was mentioned, some of these older wells that have been impacted by the reduction in the pressure within the aquifers, it may not be a bad idea to help some of them, either with loans or grants, to set aside some money to find a source. Perhaps larger developments would pay a fee to throw into a kitty, so that if there are folks who are economically disadvantaged, can't afford to do the re-drill, that at least the county would have a resource available to potentially help them out. Again, there's a lot of devil in those particular details. However, we are probably going to see one or two cases where a homeowner is going to hit the bottom, and they are going to realize that the cost of re-drilling their particular well is far, far beyond their current means. Older folks, fixed incomes, and so it may not be a bad idea to set aside a puddle of money for them to, for the county to allocate to helping the least able citizens continue to access water. Ching. It has been, I mean, this is now an 18-month process in getting to this point. The act of doing this plan has been the most important part, not the final result here. I think it's taught us a lot about what we need to do, what we don't know, what we do know, and where we need to go from here. Thanks to Will and Bill and the team underneath the surface there with Forrest Green LRE and Logan Simpson in helping us get to this point. Thanks to you guys for continuing to support this effort. Thanks to the planning commissioners for providing good input, and thanks to citizens for coming out and having a voice in this. I think our biggest, if we were to admit a biggest mistake on this one, it was that we did not have enough public engagement. It was, there's plenty more opportunity for it, and that's why at the end of the day, I think the Citizen Water Advisory Board is a good idea going forward. It gets the citizens, keeps citizens involved in this, which is very important to everybody in the county. And with that, I'll open it up for questions, comments, concerns.
Questions or comments?
Just an oddball question. The developers, and when they make presentations, their start on the water determination is the state 100-year water. And that's before a well is actually drilled. So, and one of my degrees has a lot of geology in it, so I understand how rocks change and things like that. So, but where I'm going with this is when the actual wells are drilled, how closely do they conform to what the state says you would expect?
I'll have to turn that over to Bill.
We don't have any real true data from Elbert County on this, but we have done this in a similar analysis in Arapahoe County, where we actually took a look at geophysical logs. One thing the state does, and we've been able to refine that, is the state takes their geophysical logs and literally put them up on a big, wall and try to stitch together, where the different levels are of the aquifer. Wherever it might be. What we've been able to do is use in Arapahoe County is a modeling software called Petra. And what we're able to do with that is take in not only geophysical logs from the state engineer's office, but raster logs, oil and gas logs, whatever, to really put together a digital footprint of we can actually make it to 3D if we want to, but we've pretty much done 2D, where we were able to stitch together all these wells that have data from geophysical logs or other methods, to really get an idea of what those thicknesses are and where those aquifers are. in addition to taking a look at the data, being the resistivity, to really take a look at, what is the production of these wells. What we have found, and when we've compared what the state engineer's records are based upon the Senate Bill 5 determination versus these petrologs, is on average about 60% of the water that is permitted under a decree or a permit physically is available through conventional drilling techniques. So, and we've seen that just as anecdotal data as we've installed wells. As I indicated earlier in my presentation, you'll get a well permit that says 150 GPM, 200 acre feet, just throwing a number out there. You drill the well and you get 50 GPM. That's just what the aquifer is going to do. We're able to further refine that with this petromodeling to say, okay, this is really what it is going to be. It is going to be 60%. It's going to be 20% of what we would expect the state engineer to do. Now, we've had comments that come back from a few folks that say, well, that's just one well estimated on conventional technology. What if I put in 15 wells? I can still get my allocation. I'm not going to disagree with that, but the issue is you're going to have well interference. You're going to have a lot of other problems that you have that you wouldn't have with just a 1 or 2 well scenario. So it's not just a simple black and white that if I put in 15 wells, I'll get my allocation. To put on top of that, the Colorado Supreme Court just recently came out with a decision, and this was as a result of Parker's objection to the state engineer putting in a finite limitation of the amount of water underlying the land. The way Parker's argument was, this should be an annual limitation. The state computes the amount of water underlying your land, divides it by 100, and you get that permitted amount per year to pull out. The Colorado Supreme Court said, no, the statutes are simply you get 100 years. That's it. Whatever the state computes, that's what you get underneath your land. What happens in 100 years, we don't know. And so we're still trying to figure what that's going to be, how that's going to be fleshed out. Obviously, there's concerns from various developers that have had wells in the ground since the mid-70s. That's 50 years that they've been pumping on that aquifer. Do they have 50 years left? Do they have more water left in that existing aquifer? We don't know if that's going to be addressed in the Colorado legislature this year. Similar to the Vance decision that was passed, a number of years back, dealing with oil and gas, how the Supreme Court came down and said any water pulled out of the ground, whether it's oil and gas or water wells, required a permit from the state engineer. The engineer said there's just not impossible for them to do that. That would be more than 85,000 new well permits because of oil and gas. So the legislature stepped in and helped that out. They said, if it's not being used outside the oil and gas arena, you don't need to get a well permit because it's considered a product of the oil and gas system. But if you want to use it for an alternate beneficial use, now you have to come to get a permit from the state. How is the legislature going to step in, if they step in at all, with this new Denver Basin decision by the Supreme Court? Wait to find out. But I mean, we've already received questions from various counties saying, hey, we're approving a subdivision out here. The Supreme Court said this, no matter what you do, they got 100 years of water based upon this. They got this volume computation. And you say 100 years, groundwater doesn't flow that way. I mean, it comes in from all directions. So you don't know if you're going to have 100 years or 200 years, whatever it is. But there is a volume calculation that the state makes. That's it. That's all you get. And you have to pull it out no more than 1% per year. But, there's all these counties that, reduce that to a 300-year supply or divide that by a third to expand the aquifer. But you can never go above that volume. And that's going to cause potentially some concern, because there's some counties are saying, well, we want to have water supply in perpetuity. How do we have it in perpetuity when we have a finite supply by law? Not by geology, but by law, you get X amount of water. So we're still trying to figure it out. It's only been out for a month in the decision, so we don't really know how we're going to dive into it. And I mean, it was a good dissent by Justice Boatwright. So how this is all going to be figured out is going to be a challenge for the next legislative session. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, I used to drill oil and gas wells, so I understand what your example there. But the thing is that it's interesting is sedimentary geology. You may have a lot of porosity and permeability here, and 10 paces over there, it's different. So that's where I was going, is the continuity of the rock, and it's hard to speculate until you actually drill the well and log it and do all those other things with it.
Exactly. I mean, one of a really good example of this is the city of Bennett, or the town of Bennett. They rely on Laramie Fox Hills wells. in and around the city. And those wells pump in 150 to 200 gallon a minute. Fox Hills, which you never, not even heard of.
Well, that, you bringing up the Fox Hills is an interesting thing, because as you go east from here, each one of the aquifers pinches out.
Right.
By the time you get over by Agate, the only one left is the Laramie Fox Hills.
Correct.
And I used to have several wells in there, and the water smelled like sulfur.
Correct.
So where I'm going with that is, are more than one of these aquifers contaminated either with salts or other chemicals, or, and I think the sulfur comes from basically interbedded with coal, I think.
That's correct. That's right. It's naturally occurring. It's, you know, we've seen that. The other thing that we see as we start going east away from the hogback, you start seeing finer and finer grains in the sand. So it's harder to get water out of the ground, which again is counterintuitive. When you're at Bennett, you're getting 150, 200 gallon a minute. In the Fox Hill, which is the deepest, finest grain, well, we know because we've dealt with a client half a mile away, they were getting 10 gallons a minute out of the same aquifer. So again, geology is complicated. It's not a simple, you know, this works here, so it's going to work over here. And the more tools we have to be able to understand this and really kind of take a look at it, is just more tools for the county to take a look at when they're actually looking at developments and relying on this resource.
And the other question is that you talk about when you go out, drill into a formation, you should drill all the way through, because if you only drill in the first 10 feet, and I just pull that out of the air, is it'll produce for a little while, then quit. And that's because of the way the rocks are laid down. You don't have any vertical permeability. You have horizontal permeability.
Correct, correct. And that's, and again, now, and you bring up a point that we've talked about in other counties as well, is when you deal with this, well, like I mentioned, 60% on average in Arapahoe County is physically available versus what the state engineer says. Well, there's folks looking at horizontal well drilling into the aquifers, and is that going to produce more water? I mean, that's a technical challenge significantly, but there are other techniques now that are being thought of to basically make more availability of the resource. But that's just not on the market now. I mean, conventional well drilling is still there, drilling down into the aquifer, sealing off the upper aquifers and having your screen. So, you know, again, these things are coming in the future, and then how it's dealt with legally is just going to be one of those challenges we're going to deal with for the next number of years.
Oh, I appreciate the work and the effort from everybody involved, from staff to our contract workers to the committee and everybody, the planning commission, everybody that was involved with this. A lot of work. I appreciate it. As I went through, I did have several questions, and I'm not sure who's going to be best to answer. Maybe do a round robin. I don't know where this goes through. But one of the first questions I had in our order of our packet and the plan, the public comment was kind of toward the back. And as I got to that point, it was like, well, some of these questions that the public brought up have already been addressed in the write-up. So I'm assuming that the order was that we had the public engagement, questions were made, and then they were addressed to some extent, or what could be done within the plan.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, really, the public engagement actually took place in January of 2024. And so, we started with a little bit of an education component. We started that community engagement session with a little bit of education. Again, describing the aquifers as has already been done here. And then we pulled out the public questions. And so, really from the very beginning, a lot of this, what is the public concerned about, was taken in those public engagement session, or in that public engagement session in January, and also in the survey, the online survey as well. And so really the basis of a lot of this is, well, how are we going to address public questions about this? So yes, the public engagement it's a very, very thick annex at the back of the document, but realize that was actually the beginning of the conversation.
I assume that, but I wanted to make sure, so I appreciate that. I'll just go through the questions I had as I went through, and I don't even know if this is a question most appropriately answered here. But how did we get the 2018 state demographer having such a wide variety in population estimates between 2018 and now? It seems to be a big gap, answer's probably somewhere in the middle, but we don't know. I was just, if anybody knows.
Yeah, I mean, between Will and I, we've got at least a bit of the story. The idea really back in 2017-ish, when the original demography numbers for 2018 and growth were popping up, that was kind of heyday of the growth period of both the Denver metro area and then Elbert County as a proximate to it. And so their projections were optimistic in terms of growth. Subsequently, they started looking at the impact of cost of housing, the actual numbers of immigration, the death, the birth rates, death rates kind of stuff that the demographer does, and significantly downgraded not just the overall, not just the growth for Elbert County, but also the growth for, major portions of Colorado and Colorado as a whole. And so the demographer, the state demographer will admit that they were awfully, again, optimistic or pessimistic, depending on one's perspective, in the growth from 2018, 2017, when those numbers were first being worked, to 2030 at that time, but they have since pulled way back on that for a variety of reasons.
And that's largely based on updated information from the U.S. Census Bureau from 2020. And so with the Census Bureau projections, there was reduced economic output.
Commissioner, can I have the podium, please?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
We're missing the recording.
So the newer projections are largely based on the results of the 2020 census and a reduced economic output that was projected based on those results.
Yeah, I was going to say over the years, it's steadily moved downward, that 2050 projection, and I know that was kind of a kick in the pants to get going on what had been our 21-year-old comprehensive plan when we took office, that we were looking at potentially tripling population in a 30 to 35 year period with with a plan that was built in the late 90s, early 2000s, so really didn't provide guidance to, if you want to talk about uncontrolled growth, it would be having a plan that doesn't address the maximum. So I think still looking at the larger numbers as you work through this makes absolute sense, because if that can be accommodated, or that can be the principles that guide our thinking, lesser growth is going to be easier to accommodate.
Yes, sir.
No, I agree with that. Just wanted some clarification on that, as it seems to be a continually topic that is brought up in the public, and to have a good answer on the record for that is a good thing. I appreciate the comment that aquifers aren't a bathtub. A lot of people, they hear aquifer and they just think there's a pool of water down there, and don't understand the process and how water's extracted with that. But on that same point, the 4% that the Elbert County uses, do we have any data or idea of how quickly water would migrate over a length of time, or how far it would migrate to balance out? If Douglas County is sucking a lot to fill up Reuter Hess, and how long does the water migrate out of Elbert County, so to speak? How does that? Is there any study or understanding of how that works?
It goes very slowly, I know. Bill, you have a better answer?
Yeah, I don't have specific numbers in that regard, but the Denver Basin does not migrate, laterally very fast at all. One of the ways, and one of the reasons we know that is when you look at the state engineer's decision on rebuttable presumption on well-to-well interference is 600 feet in the Denver Basin versus a half a mile in the alluvial aquifers. So that really gives you an idea of the transmissivity in the Denver Basin versus an alluvial aquifer. An alluvial aquifer is going to reach out a lot more, and it's going to have a lot greater impact, and it's going to flow a lot faster versus those tight geologic formations in the Denver Basin. I can get that information for the county. I know that information has been published by the state engineer's office. I just don't have that readily available at this time.
I think that would be a useful addendum or addition next year when we do an update or whatever the case may be, because that'll give us a broader picture of the region and what's going on there. The idea of recharging aquifers from other sources into the water, on the surface, that scares me. I guess there would take a lot more education on that. In the mid-2000s, that was probably the last time this county was united in one thing, was against a proposal that was similar to that. So I guess my question is, what kind of effect does that have on water quality, on the pressures? Is there a danger in too much pressure if that is a practice? Just more in from whatever information you have on that idea of recharging aquifers.
Yeah, I can share with you that the Highlands Ranch Water District has done this for decades very successfully with aquifer storage and recovery. And there's a large reservoir right by 470 in Santa Fe there that they use to capture those higher flows, and then they treat it to drinking water standards before they inject the water. And it's all very well regulated and have to meet very stringent requirements for water quality.
Do they measure the pressure then as it's changing, as they're putting more water in there into the aquifer?
They do see a bubble of higher pressure in those areas that they recharge, and they're able to draw that water down over time during the drier years.
So they have some similar, like our USGS study, that are monitoring levels and pressures before the confined and unconfined, and that as they're doing that?
I would imagine they do a lot of monitoring there.
It's all part of the DWR permitting process that they have to do that. And it's complicated, aquifer storage and recovery, as you can imagine, dealing with the various regulatory agencies, whether it be UIC permitting from the federal government for water quality versus the pressure impacts, about how far water will travel, where you can take credit for all that, and it's complicated. And again, those are some of the things that we've done in the past as a firm, but yeah, it's something that's done. It's been done, across the state here. I know there's a Pinery done that as well. I'm not sure they've done some of that. Aquifer storage recovery. Denver's looking into it really heavily, as well as Aurora, to inject excess water into the Denver basins for drought contingency, to basically take zero out of the Denver basin unless it's for emergency drought purposes. So it's something that's really being studied. But yeah, pressures and quality and all that are monitored as water's pushed into the ground.
South Metro Water Supply Authority is doing a regional analysis of ASR right now.
Okay. Very good. I sure appreciate the information. You guys are a wealth of knowledge and did a lot of work. I really, really appreciate it.
And I had one question I'd like to ask. I think it's for Eric. At your last bullet point on the previous page, you're talking about loans or grants, possibly impact fees associated with that. What jurisdictions offer those presently, if any, that you're aware of? DOLA, other counties, other towns? Because I know there's certainly restrictions on impact fees and how those are able to be imposed, and prohibitions on loans from local governments in certain cases. And as far as grants, certainly a lot of federal grants are out there, that sort of thing. So I guess my question is, what jurisdictions may provide or utilize those sorts of grants presently? Counties or towns, and what sort of jurisdictions may also do those types of loans?
Yeah, and thanks for your question, Bart. And I will, so by way of a little bit of background, we are in some ways, we're a very unique county because of our reliance on the aquifer. So we kind of stand alone in a lot of this approach. So as far as I know, I believe there's one or two counties down in the San Juan basin, that may have programs. Those are, I think those, my guess, I'd have to do the research a little bit deeper, is that those are nonprofit, they're 501c3. There's community associations or associations set up by the communities to gain some of these funds, gain access. And most likely, the most likely source of funding is going to be through, in most cases, probably USDA for those type of programs for rural communities, rural landowners. To be honest, we haven't dug that deep into how this goes down, but certainly the way they would have to happen would have to be, we would have to dig into the details to make sure that we are doing all those things in the right way.
As far as existing cases, potentially, it's not necessarily the local government itself. It's a nonprofit that is utilized for that.
Yeah, in most cases, yeah.
So USDA or DOLA or somebody like that may also have certain programs that may apply.
Yeah, and I will return to the point of, there is potentially some need, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, looking at a particular commissioner, for us to be better advocates for ourselves in Denver and within state policy, and is to, if the governor wants to continue to grow Colorado and put housing, and try to catch up to the housing shortage in Colorado, water is the next question after that. And so there is some possibility that after, if everything that is an encouragement to build more housing, the next line of that particular bill needs to be, and this is how we're going to continue to guarantee access for existing landowners for water. And so we can be a better advocate for ourselves. And if the state, if the state decides that they'd like to start a slush fund for impacted well owners, I would highly encourage that. Not looking at anyone.
No, I happen to know the next ranking member of the Transportation, Housing, and Local Government Committee. I think probably the most accurate statement that was repeated several times today is it is complicated. And I absolutely appreciate all the effort that went into this. And I know it's kind of been a lengthy morning, so I just wanted to kind of highlight a couple of things. And there are obvious tensions whenever the water discussions occur in this county. There's various levels of education and knowledge, and everybody has an opinion, but having documents that we can all share, is a tremendous boon and boost in moving forward. But I guess to me, a lot of what this comes down to moving forward is really defining roles and responsibilities. We've got what is considered a shared resource, but is in actuality a property right on the individual level. I absolutely support the need for further education among our citizenry, but we also have to recognize we're not the water providers, we're not the individual well owners, we're not community water providers. So having that voice, a citizen advisory council we've had in the past, and that there's tremendous benefit there, but we also have to have the voice of those that are providing of water providers, and within that too. Otherwise it becomes a very closed discussion and kind of from a scarcity mindset of I'm an individual. Well, if we have a lot of individual well owners that are impacted, but they're the only ones in the room, the discussion naturally turns to the concerns on their individual wells. So I think we have to, I mean, you said you'd scratched out some bylaws, and that's great. And if they're modeled on the weed advisory committee, which was very educationally focused, I think that's great. We just got to make sure we have the right folks, that the conversation stays balanced. And then finally, in that tension, again, we have the county taking action in something that the state has primacy for directly to the well owners and the water providers. So where is our appropriate role within that? I think it's fairly safe to say that this county is not looking at becoming a water provider or a utility. But how do we provide guidance that perhaps provides for those interconnections, for future proofing, for adopting the technologies that come forward that provide conservation while still supporting our traditional well owners, that investment was made by potentially 2 or 3 owners previously, or was made 40 years ago. And then is it just some things age out? I mean, we get new roofs because we have hailstorms all the time, but if we didn't have hailstorms all the time, we'd have homeowners that couldn't afford new roofs. Maybe they can't afford their insurance now, but exploring those things I think is important. But we got to keep an eye on what are our specific responsibilities of the county, what roles can we play, and what roles should we play as a local government. We're more of a referee on the field than a player, and then sometimes we're just going to be sitting in the stands and watching in horror, as we do some Sundays, about what's going on. So, but really good work. It's, as you noted at the beginning, it's not the end point. It's just this is another step along a water future that's going to take constant vigilance. So I just appreciate all the effort that's gone into this. So thank you. All right. Did we have any public comment on this? Yes.
If I could just
Yes.
say,
You're a citizen.
really enjoyed working with your staff and really appreciate Mark's and Eric's leadership on this. And thank you all for the opportunity to work with you on this water master plan.
Yeah, and I did want to, Mr. Koger, though a contracted support to this, is also a citizen of our county and obviously has a vested interest in us doing this right. And Mr. Weatherby, thank you again, and other members of the steering committee. I think it was there's no right answer because there isn't an answer, but this is good information and it will guide our future well. So thank you. Yeah. Again, I'd say, was there any public comment, Mike? Or
okay. Mike Buck, 39255 Private Road 17. I was a member of the Planning Commission during the first rollout of the plan. I'm an incoming county commissioner member, and I had some concerns about the plan, and I just wanted some clarification on a quick question that I had. One of the questions was comprehensive/master plan. Could it be called that? That was my question during the Planning Commission meeting, because it didn't take into account any of the surrounding counties' drawdown on the Denver basis. As we all know, and the study presented itself, that we're only 4% of the drawdown or the usage in the Denver basin. Now, I was told at 2 hours and 2 minutes into that presentation that that was not part of the scope of work to present any of that analysis, trend analysis and uses analysis of the neighboring counties. And I went and I looked at the scope of work, and it was included. And I have a copy for each of the commissioners. I've highlighted the pertinent information, and I'll read: as they apply to Elbert County and as related to water access and usage trends in adjacent counties. Now, I understand we're not in a bowl, we're not in a bathtub, but I think it's very important, if we're only 4%, to not look at Elbert County in a bubble and say we have 9,000 years worth of water, or we have 400 years worth of water in the Upper Dawson. So those were concerning questions that I had at that time. I came back today to see if we could get any clarification on that, and I brought a copy of the scope of work that references that clarification question. And we have all the partners here today. Everybody's present that's a player in the study. I thought today would be a good day to bring it up and just get some clarification on that.
okay, thanks.
Thank you.
John?
John Hill, Ranchland News in Kiowa. The Ranchland News this year reported on the electromagnetic survey that was completed in the El Paso County, the helicopter flew from Meadow Lake Airport in Falcon. The helicopter pilot was from Florida. Jared Abraham was the technician formerly of USGS who basically did the analysis of the data and reported to the Upper Black Squirrel Creek Groundwater Management District several weeks ago, the results from his study. The flights, or the team that assembled the equipment, which was the size of this building, the frame was the size of this building, that was flown for a week on a pattern in the Upper Black Squirrel Creek Groundwater Management District. The management district paid $450,000 for the week for the equipment to fly the route and then complete the study report and so on. But that included, to answer your questions, the technicians and all the equipment arrived at Meadow Lake Airport from Denmark. They were designed at the university in Denmark. That study was funded by European grant money. So part of the funding for this that will be returned eventually to the Upper Black Squirrel Groundwater Management District and to El Paso County is from Europe. Some of the money is from Jared Abraham and some is from USGS and so on. So there are various sources for that kind of money. Now everybody hold your hands 4 feet apart. Hold your hands 4 feet apart. The electromagnetic survey that was flown by the helicopter is that accurate to depth. All of the groundwater management, all of the aquifers that were described today at depth, to a depth of 1,700 feet, I'm saying that's the deepest. That survey is accurate to within 4 feet at 1,700 feet, whether you have water or you have sand.
Thank you. All right. I guess of the team, did you want to address the impacts of neighboring counties, or what the concerns were? I mean, to me, what I heard was very little lateral transmission. So, and again, we're allocated based on what's beneath us, not what somebody else is using adjacent to us, and it is an inexact science. But
right. Let's say the water master plan was prepared with the knowledge of what's going around in surrounding counties and that regional perspective. But as far as a detailed analysis of the groundwater impacts from other counties, that would be, a very extensive study with lots and lots of assumptions that you'd have to work through. It'd be a pretty major study to do that.
Yeah, I guess my thought would be that would be a cooperative regional study, probably through the basins themselves to get to that level of,
yes, sir,
of detail. Again, I appreciate you bringing that up, Mike, but I guess there's always going to be more study that has to be done. Oh. Okay, I get it. You've quoted words from a contract. Adjacent counties were addressed in the presentation today. Adjacent counties are addressed in the report itself. It may not be to the, again, this is not your concern is noted. The interpretation of what is in a contract and whether it was actually fulfilled or not is again, we can have differences of opinion on what the contract terminology states, but I am confident that the monies that we were granted were used appropriately. and in accordance with the contract that was let. Thanks. All right. Again, appreciate your time. The next three items we have for discussion are related to intergovernmental agreement updates between neighboring counties and cities in relation to the Elora subdivision. I'll turn this over to.
I'm planning on speaking on this, Bart Greer, County Attorney. Monty can certainly clean up anything that I don't cover, but all three of these items are related to the Elora subdivision. Essentially, that development meant we had to kind of revisit our relationships in that area with, we were speaking with Douglas County, with Arapahoe County, Aurora, all of those, and, personnel from all of those various governments and public works departments, that sort of thing. So we came up with agreements related to ensure that traffic control device, essentially a traffic light, will be implemented there, and some of the responsibilities associated with the costs of that, including obviously the developer for that. But as that is implemented and that road becomes something that more and more people use, obviously the development needs to pay for itself. There needs to be some improvements based on some additional usage of that. And then ultimately the maintenance of County Road 194, essentially where it's located. There's been some gentlemen's agreements and frankly some written agreements about that previously. Those have not been updated in at least a decade. And so we went through those three different agreements, which really deals with, one deals with a very small section of road. The other deals with the larger part of the cooperation on County Road 194. And the last agreement that we worked on, and Monty and his folks and everybody that's kind of a counterpart and other jurisdictions worked pretty hard on this, is to ensure that that traffic control device is put in, it's sufficient, and that the development itself is contributing mightily towards that traffic control device, because that's why it needs to be going in there in the first place. So those are essentially what we're looking at. They're all complementary to each other because they do deal with Elora. And I can certainly field any questions that you may have.
No, I appreciate it. That one was, I know it's been relatively complex because it's that far northwest part of the corner or of the county, and you said the County Line Road and Elbert Road that are the access to that community are by agreement in portions that are maintained by, was Arapahoe County, now Arapahoe County, and the city of Aurora for a piece of it, and Elbert County. So we actually don't have maintainers even going along or any maintenance requirement, but we'll have citizens. So I appreciate you and Monty and those in Public Works kind of taking this on to make sure it's done properly. I know we've had some issues in the past with, snow clearance up on 194 because it's really it's starting to change a little up there, but it was an unoccupied part of Arapahoe County that they weren't terribly concerned about getting to as much as we were concerned about, our citizens coming along county line trying to get out of the county to get into Douglas County to go to work or come back and forth. So I think just having that discussion was long overdue. So I'm glad we've got these kind of tightened up for this. Any questions or?
No, this is just what you need to get done before Elora can initiate construction.
So, yeah, I think they look good. We've generally kept things, give a little time. The documents are out there now. I think we can safely put them on consent for next week's meeting unless something arises that we didn't anticipate. So moving on to action items. Got a series of minutes from previous meetings and special meetings. I would accept a motion to approve the October 23rd minutes and dispense with the reading.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the October 23rd, 2024 minutes and dispense with the reading of those minutes.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the October 23rd minutes and dispense with the reading. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Similar with that meeting did roll into the 24th for some items, so I would accept a motion to approve the minutes from the 24th of August.
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the minutes from October 24th, 2024, as presented and dispense with the reading of those minutes.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt the minutes from the October 24th meeting and dispense with the reading. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. Similarly, the meeting of November 13th.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the November 13th, 2024 minutes as written and dispense with the reading of those minutes.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second to adopt the minutes of our regular meeting of November 13th, 2024 and dispense with the reading. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. We also had a special meeting on that date. I would accept a motion to approve the minutes from that special meeting.
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the minutes as written from the November 13th, 2024 special meeting and dispense with the reading of those minutes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the minutes of the special meeting on November 13th and dispense with the reading. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. All righty. We had a special meeting on the 21st of November. I would accept a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the minutes for November 21st, 2024 special meeting minutes as written and dispense with the reading of those minutes.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second to adopt the minutes of the November 21st meeting and dispense with the reading. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. And on the 25th, another special meeting. I would accept a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the special meeting minutes from November 25th, 2024 and dispense with the reading of those minutes.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the minutes of the special meeting held on November 25th, 2024 and dispense with the reading. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Now we're going to slow things down a little bit and talk about our 2025 county budget. So, Tiffany, if you need a moment or two to come on up. We had previously held on November 23rd or November 13th public hearing on the budget. This presentation today allows us to look at adjustments that have been made since that meeting and in preparation for our meeting next week, where we'll actually consider voting in public hearing on appropriations to fund operations in 2025. All right, Tiffany, the floor is yours.
To present to you the 2025 final budget. We're here today to provide the citizens in the BOCC of the final approval of the 2025 budget. Here is an overview of the county as a whole, revenue and expenditures 2024 plus over 2025. We do have an increase in both the revenue and the expenditures, but our revenue is exceptionally higher than our proposed expenses for the new year. Just a quick look at the general fund. Revenue and expenditures, again, it is increasing in both the revenue and the expenditures, but we do see the revenue increasing more than our expenditures, and that is due to the increase in interest on accounts and our program revenue, which is specifically building and planning. We are going to fund some of our expenditures from the fund balance in 2025. We are continuing to provide $1 million in tax relief to our citizens, and then we're going to use fund balance for building leases, some contract services, and some capital purchases. The FTEs that were requested and approved is for the OEM disaster recovery, a GIS position in planning, road and bridge. They are going to have 2 additional truck drivers as well as a service technician. Here's a quick glimpse of the 2024 budgeted FTEs. That number is very small. It was at 216.5, and it includes, because we had some half-time employees. And in 2025, we're going to approve 218.5 positions. So we had some positions that were removed and then some that were added to come up with that total. Department requests. It was confirmed that facilities is going to have 2 additional F-350 pickups, a Gator with a V-plow. IT, we were going to purchase an old vehicle from ESSO, but after speaking with Ethan, there is a vehicle in the fleet that we can provide them with, so there will be no additional purchase for that. A 12-passenger van for our 4-H to go down to Pueblo every year, and some trainings, as well as some additional Tahoes for the sheriff's office, and then road and bridge for multiple pieces of 1.4, and that's out of their 25 fund. Capital projects that we're going to budget for. The sheriff's office, we are going to keep $50,000 in there, not necessarily for an interview room specifically, but for additional changes that they may need depending on. Their ballistic shields, which we've already started, and their other SWAT gear that we've already started having them collect the prices. If we're able to collect anything here in 2024, we'll go ahead and purchase those. Otherwise, we have those purchased or budgeted in 2025 as well. Oh, sorry, excuse me. Then they will be replacing some additional jail doors in their detentions. We'll also be remodeling the restrooms in the admin building, the sub-remodel, and then a crow's nest at the main arena at the fairgrounds. For our employees, it was determined that we'll do a 3% COLA and then a 5% merit. And then our benefit subsidy will increase by an additional $250 a month. Here's just a quick overview of what the fund balances were in your 2023 audit. And then based on the information in the 2025 budget the 2024 budget based on forecasting, this is the forecasted fund balances. You'll see that some of them have decreased. Most of them have increased though. It's your road and bridge and your sales and use tax that have used some of their fund balance. But pretty much everyone else, besides the Conservation Trust as well because of the fairgrounds projects, will be increasing their fund balances. Questions from you?
Just generally overall, it's pretty well a balanced budget.
Correct.
And by balance, I mean cost and expenses are close to what revenue is.
Our reoccurring costs are being covered by our revenue, yes.
We've been through this lots of times. We certainly appreciate all the work from you and your staff and everybody across the county in putting together a budget. It's always a great process to watch, as it is something that all the county departments participate in, and it makes it work. So, but thank you for leading the charge, and we appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'll echo that. And again, I think tremendous work. When I think we started, as we normally do, about $2 million out of whack, and I know we got down to about $4,500 at one point, and then started looking again at one-time costs that we should appropriately use fund balance for. Again, glad that we can continue to provide a level of tax relief, and I think we'll have a reassessment year coming up in the next year or so. The future board will have to look and see what, if, again, if those assessments go up, what's the appropriate amount of money to actually take from our citizens in order to provide the services we provide. And again, after 8 years, I was looking in 2017, I think across the board, our total fund balances were about 8.5 million. From what I saw, we're around 40 million total now. So there's a lot of flexibility and ability to address urgent needs there, which is important. I mean, when we saw the flooding a few years ago, I won't say we took it in stride because there was a heck of a lot of effort that went into addressing that and a lot of cost. But when we see things like a kind of surprise heavy wet December snowfall that costs us $400,000 when normally we're not getting that much at this point in the year, having some money for that flexibility to respond for our citizens without keeping so much that we're just sitting on money is absolutely the right thing to do. Took a look at the variance reports from the end of November. It looks like we're coming in very close on a lot. I mean, we're underspent in a lot of areas. Revenues looked like about 2.9 million over anticipated revenues coming into the general fund this year. So again, we've very traditionally over the years, to be conservative, have kind of overestimated costs and underestimated revenues, and that has allowed fund balances to build. And I think the last 2 years we worked very hard to start getting a little more realistic. The fund balance is there, so our department heads and directors should not feel like if they underestimate their costs by a bit that it's going to ruin their lives or impact their ability to provide services. We have those monies there, and I know we're coming close in a couple of funds. So I think as part of next week, I think we're planning to do some supplementals just to make sure we don't overspend any appropriation from this year. But again, most of our activity is in the general fund, which is fairly close. I know Public Works still had residual costs that we're going to have to make sure we cover that had to be spent in order to provide the services we provide daily. But just really good work overall. And then I look forward to our last public hearing on budget-related stuff next week. Do we have anything public comment on this? Okay. Aaron.
Aaron Warren, Elbert County Emergency Management Director. Just wanted to give you a big thank you for approving the disaster recovery specialist and damage assessment. She has been instrumental under the DOLA funding currently. We are finalizing the debris management plan for the county and working towards a damage assessment plan that will encourage and improve reimbursement rates from the state as well as the federal government, and multiple projects including grants for rebuilding bridges throughout the county. So you have invested not only in my department but Elbert County's future. So I just wanted to say thank you very much.
Thank you, Aaron. And that does bring, I mean, both the efforts in your department, Public Works and Finance, to start seeing FEMA reimbursements within a year of when the disaster occurred has certainly been unknown in this county. I mean, the flooding, I believe it was the 2013 flooding, we didn't close the books on until I think 2018. So the fact that we've started to get some and will be closed out in the next year is just amazing. I mean, I have no more to add to that other than I figured that would be something that we would be tracking as a due-in for much of the coming decade. But
Well, we are getting recognized across the state for our excellent service in all departments and as a county. So they have asked me to speak at the Colorado Emergency Managers Association specifically regarding disaster recovery 4731, the overview. So myself will be discussing that, as well as our grants finance specialist, Ashley Deanne, will be with me as well to answer those very particular items. And then my deputy director has also been invited to host a talk there. So we are being shown and admired at the state level and county level and jurisdictional level in that aspect. So
That is great to hear. And again, it happens because people are good at their job and they actually care about doing it right. And that has shown throughout the county over this last several years. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so with that, I think just to lock in those items that were approved for FTEs and purchases, I would accept a motion to approve the spending that was outlined in Tiffany's presentation.
I move that we approve the expenses and income as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the expenses and revenues as presented. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye, motion carries. All righty, and then I know this is what most people have been waiting for. The one additional action item we had today was consideration of acceptance of a portion or the remaining portion of Augusta Loop and Spring Valley Ranches. So it was the collector through that area.
Yes, sir. Good morning. Monty Hankins, Elbert County Public Works Director. It's been several years since Augusta Loop was built in the first 3 phases of Spring Valley Ranches. It was identified in 2018 that the road was never formally accepted by the county. There was an extensive punch list of repairs put before the developer in 2018 for them to repair the road up to county standard in order for us to look at accepting. That did take place over the course of a year or two, those upgrades and repairs within that road. So in August of 2021, the county received a formal request for acceptance letter from the developer, and from now to then, it has just been kind of put aside for unknown reasons. I took it upon myself, along with cooperation from the developer, to move forward with that. So we have had a few discussions and study sessions, such as the one yesterday with you guys, to discuss this out. And I have put before you a resolution for full formal acceptance of Augusta Loop. It's 7,050 feet of that road. We've already accepted the second half of that loop. It is a primary collector within Spring Valley, so it falls within the standards, road and bridge standards for acceptance. The odd thing about it, and it is identified on the resolution, that we do have a separate agreement with the developer and the Metro District that they are going to take on the snow plowing and sign maintenance for all filings of Spring Valley. So that is spelled out within the resolution. We are just doing maintenance, not to include signs or snow plowing. So I would request that you guys approve that resolution to accept Augusta Loop. And if you have any questions.
Yeah, and it's also consistent with our current standards of just collector routes, not neighborhood roads.
Correct.
Yeah. Any questions or comments?
That changed in with the update to the regs in 2019.
Yeah, I know that. I guess requests came in the midst of COVID, and then changes in public works directors. And
correct.
So, and I think you did mention yesterday, Dale has been out, that the repairs that were made.
Yes, we
punch
did.
list repairs have held up, and there's no concerns.
Correct. We dispatched our current county engineer out to inspect the road, and they are in excellent condition.
Any public comment on this? Okay. Seeing none, I'd accept a motion to accept the remaining portion of Augusta Loop into the county roads network.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the resolution to formally accept Augusta Loop as a county road.
Second.
All righty. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. Thanks, Monty.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to board planning. As I said, we do have a meeting scheduled for next week. Originally, it was just for appropriations, but we do have a few other items to take up. So we'll have appropriations for the 2025 budget, any supplementals that we need to cover potential shortfalls in 2024, the IGAs related to Elora traffic signal, County Line, and Elbert Road on consent. And we can pull that off if there's any concerns that come up. And then having received the water plan, I think just have a formal acknowledgement that we've received it. So it's not regulatory, so there's really not an approval. But, and then if we could schedule a study session or workshop to talk through kind of the eaches on the cash in lieu sometime in the next month or so. I think that might be it. Are they playing us off? All right, and then we do have 2 land use hearings this afternoon. One is within the EDZ, Genesis RV boat storage, RV and boat storage, and the Ingalls rezone. That'll take place at this location at 1 o'clock. Until that time, we are adjourned, and please go. Yeah.